everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Research Works podcast. We're here once again, in case you've missed it, at EACD Galway, Ireland 2026. Speaking to a wide variety of clinicians, professionals, researchers from all over the globe. And, you know, it's always funny when I come to these conferences and I speak to someone that's actually from Australia. But there's something about speaking in person. And the person I have on the podcast right now is one of the keynote speakers. Welcome to the pod, Katrina Williams.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's lovely to have you. I remember looking through the conference program and I saw your name and I saw the topic and thought I definitely need to speak with you. We have a mutual friend that is Alison Salt. I was having dinner with her and she said, "Oh, my friend Katrina Williams will be speaking." I'm like, well, I'm going to be contacting her. So it is fantastic. Great. It's a small world, actually, isn't it?
It is.
It's very few degrees of separation. Look, the title of your keynote creates a lot of intrigue, an area that we haven't covered very much, very curious about because I think it's a very important topic. It's titled Developmental Regression in Childhood, Identification, Investigation and Outcomes. First up, what is developmental regression?
So developmental regression is when a child loses skills that they've previously mastered. It can occur in any of the developmental domains. We probably most commonly hear about children who are using less words who stop talking, for example. But other children will have changes in their fine motor or gross motor activity and in their social interaction and interest in other people. As you can imagine, it's incredibly distressing for a parent to watch if their child has been interacting and talking and fully engaged and showing progress with learning to see things head in the opposite direction.
Even as you describe that, I can already think of a few young children that I've worked with where that has happened, incredibly distressing. At what age does this tend to happen? What sort of groups are we talking about here?
So the thing about developmental regression and why that was the focus of my plenary is to bring attention to the occurrence of skill loss at the time it happens.
Sure.
Traditionally in healthcare and in research, we focus on groups once we know what the diagnosis is. So developmental regression can present in children who may later go on and reacquire the skills that they lost, or gain skills gradually, or other children who may continue to lose skills over time. So the pattern, though, is not evident from the time that they first come to us.
Sure.
Most usually, back to your question, most usually we're seeing children presenting to this new clinical service we've created under 3. However, it can occur really throughout childhood. So primary school aged children could have this happen, and even on occasion, but less often in high school children.
Yeah, wow. I think I've got so many questions for you. I'm trying to, measure my thoughts on this. How do we know that there's been a loss in function? I know it sounds really like an obvious question, but, obviously there's observation, something they could do before then they can't do. There might be other things that might be more subtle. And obviously these children often might not be known to the service originally, like, for example, going back to a clinic because they weren't needed to be seen before then. How do we measure that amount of regression that happens? Because it must be quite subjective.
Yeah, it's something that has created, I think, difficulties for the field to progress because exactly as you describe, it's a retrospective report. It's a report at the time of information that is now no longer available. So parents are always incredibly important historians about their children, and they know their children really well.
Sure.
But they also have multiple other things going on in their lives at any other time, other children, moving houses, work pressures. And not all of them are trained as neurodevelopmental clinicians. So it is about their experience of their child's development and learning, and then their realisation of the loss as being key. And exactly as you say, from their observations. But because there were no necessarily identified problems previously, no one else has necessarily been involved with the child.
Yeah.
So there's the concern that pervades research is about recall and accuracy of recall.
Yeah.
And compared to the seeing it with your own eyes.
Of course. Objective assessments you might have done as screening tools. And does developmental regression happen in children who already have a diagnostic condition, or can it happen typically developing, nothing's on their radar, then suddenly it happens? Do we know which groups this happen in?
It can happen in both.
Right.
So children that have had a slower than expected development can also lose skills.
Okay.
Children with known clinical diagnoses can lose skills. The ones that our research has been and clinical care has been focusing on are those that might not be known to a service already, so that we identify them at the time that it happens. So they are children that are in the community, not necessarily at the attention of any healthcare professionals. They may have had, as you've said, developmental surveillance performed, so we may have that information from their, in Australia it would be their maternal and child health nursing staff having reported it.
Yes.
But that's not always the case. So we're very interested in, and others in the field have been, in parent-recorded videos.
I was going to say, most people do have a phone now, and they document lives through these avenues. So has that been formalised and how that information is used?
We're not at a point of saying we've got a product that can be used by people, but we are developing a system for coding. Of course, these videos are connected by parents in their everyday lives. They're not set-up situations as you might do in an assessment. The first phases of our development has been to develop a code book to source software that seemed appropriate to our needs, and then to look at series of children who have had developmental regression and videos and work out what are the most useful types of videos to be looking at, so that we can help parents to provide us with the videos that are going to be most fruitful. And also a key question is, will the video identify skill loss that's different or prior to the time that the parents had identified it. So far we've had 2 fantastic honours students working on this, and we now have a sense of the types of videos to use, and the duration of a video after which we receive no new information. And we also know that there are some children in which on the video you can see a skill loss across a wider range of domains and earlier than was detected by the parents. So we're hoping that's useful in a few ways. We're hoping we can get something that is the kind of tool that a clinician could use when talking to parents to rapidly validate the parent's concern so that they can take more rapid action during the consultation. We're hoping the videos themselves could be helpful for training for clinicians to understand skill loss, how it might occur from a base of normal development, for want of a better way of describing it, expected milestones being reached versus those in which milestones have been reached later than in other children. And we're wondering, just casting into the future, whether it's the kind of thing that parents might invest in collecting if we had an easy way for them to collect as insurance, in the same way that they might get cord blood cells collected.
I see,
in case their child needs them. If we had a very ready way in an app of them keeping a video album, if you like, of their children, and then that would be a prospective gathering of information for those.
Yeah. I can see how this would be such a tricky area to do research. Yeah, because you're talking about something that has happened that we have not observed. And I love the idea of being able to look prospectively. But do we have an idea of the incidence of, or the prevalence, I should say, of developmental regression? Do we have statistics on that? I imagine that's also really tricky to gather.
Yeah, so the developmental regression prevalence estimates don't exist.
Yeah, okay.
Underpinning that is the lack of an internationally agreed definition of developmental regression.
Okay.
There are internationally agreed definitions of regression that are more condition specific.
Okay.
But in the broader general definition, we've been working to find that from published literature. We've conducted a Delphi survey to understand what people think would be reasonable, and we only have a very broad definition of that.
Sure.
So the two things that I draw on to think about the prevalence is that the developmental condition where regression is most commonly reported is autism spectrum disorder, which I'll say call from now on autism.
Yes.
And it's said to occur in around 25% of children with autism, with a prevalence of at least 1 in 100.
Wow.
Then another couple of groups have been working hard to estimate the prevalence of more what has been called traditionally neurodegenerative conditions, may have a genetic underpinning. And there's a group in Australia now called the Childhood Dementia Initiative, and they've been bringing together collectively the groups of conditions that can cause neurodegeneration and thinking about it as they do for rare voices, rare diseases, childhood dementia.
Yes.
So I know you've got an international listeners, but in Australia, for example, there would be 1 child a day who loses skills, and 1 in 4 of those will have a neurodegenerative condition that could be diagnosed through genetics, for example. So
is that an example like Rett's syndrome, something that we hear about, typically developing for first few years, and that's the most obvious one that comes to mind for me.
Yes, that's right. So exactly, Rett syndrome would be one that's listed as a genetic condition for the Childhood Dementia Initiative, and the opportunity to diagnose it to assist the child and the family in the understanding of the concerns and allow the family to plan for the years ahead. But the other reason for being interested in identifying developmental regression sort of now is that increasingly genetic therapies and other therapies are becoming available, and families would like to access them if appropriate to their child. Now they can be for those in which we know there's a continuing neurodegeneration and likely early death. These can be trajectory changing therapies, and families with those kinds of conditions would like to access them. They're not broadly available now, but the rate of development of them is accelerating. And then for other families where there may not be a genetic condition, we can sometimes identify an epileptic condition that is responsive to therapy, and again, trajectory changing for the child. And for others, we've heard consistently from families that the distress of watching the skill loss is adding to the load of having a child now with difficulties in joining in and participating. So they would like supports early on for them and for their families.
I can imagine that will be so important. It's the identification, going through the right pathways quickly, confirming what's happening and creating an intervention pathway. From that, in terms of, I guess, the diagnostic odyssey is probably something that comes up at this point, I imagine, because there's so many reasons. Even how you outlined it just then, there's a lot of potential reasons tests to take, timing for taking
Yes.
tests. Is that a term that's relevant for this context?
Yeah, the families have often report a diagnostic odyssey, even if not using those terms.
Sure.
They report delays getting into a system for assessment at all. And then depending on who they get to see, they report variations in what tests are done and when. And clinicians are still adjusting to this very modern world that we live in with
rapidly evolving,
rapidly evolving genetic testing available.
That's right.
And some of the families may not want to go down that pathway, and that's fine. But others, what people are asking for is consistency in being offered the opportunity.
Of course.
And then also consistency in the opportunity to have other investigations if they are interested in pursuing a cause.
Yeah.
But also not straightforward to those sorts of investigations are an EEG or a brain imaging with an MRI. And if the children are having difficulty understanding, then those things can involve quite a lot of preparation and sometimes general anaesthesia. So it's a staged approach, but working with the families. Consistency is key, and making sure all families are offered a similar opportunity which they can choose to engage with.
I've got two main questions from here. So there'll be clinicians who are listening who get presented with a child where parents are reporting developmental regression. What should they be doing right now? And I suppose my next question, just to preface that, is broader. What's your research and where is that headed? So we have got that to look forward to. But for the right now, for the clinicians who are being presented, because I mean, there'll be OTs or physios, depending on what skills have been regressed potentially, and the parent might go to that as a primary. What should they be doing?
I think recognising that developmental regression is one of the presentations that should make us think, is there a potentially underlying genetic problem that needs to be further investigated? And so for our wonderful allied health colleagues, thinking about referral into a medical pathway where that can be discussed and explored further, working with the family to understand what they've been through. We understand all families are under pressure at most points, but this is an additional load, and thinking about strategies that could come in and around and support the family and help them to coordinate the steps that are coming next for them. So, and I think for medical listeners, this should trigger, and we've recently been publishing some first-line investigations for children. Many of them are the same as the investigations that you would trigger for a child with a developmental difference, a substantial language or motor impairment. Really it's a metabolic and genetic workup. And then a workup that takes into account any other issues that the child is having, say that there are dietary concerns, for example.
Sure. No, that's great advice, because I think that's often the first line of defence, and knowing that I love how you said that. Developmental regression, when you see that, you've got to start thinking, because it's not what you'd be expecting. Further investigation is always necessary. So what is in the field? What's in the research area at the moment? You mentioned the two honours projects that's going to be leading into some further work. What are you working on, and what do we have to look forward to?
Great. So we've been really lucky to have some fabulous students working with us in the team. And our wonderful neuropsychologist who's joined our multidisciplinary team for assessments for families, which we've been fortunate to set up with some medical research future funding. But works as a clinical service. She's embarking on a PhD to look at outcomes of children. There is quite a bit of work about the outcomes of children who had a developmental regression and later were diagnosed as autistic, but not really sampling in this way that we have of attracting families to come into our research-embedded clinic from the point of developmental regression or close to it without yet knowing what the outcome might be.
Sure.
So she's going to hopefully use assessment and video to enhance our opportunities for monitoring and supporting families in a longer term way.
Yeah.
The video work around early identification is continuing.
Great.
Where in the clinic where trialling the investigations that we're recommending, and we're hoping that we'll be able to fine-tune them, and that will be beneficial to families and practitioners. Absolutely. In terms of some more specific advice about investigations. And we're working with colleagues towards developing a biobank that can be used for more discovery research around developmental regression in particular, but pending the need for future funding, a group that work in adult dementia, for example, and are identifying biomarkers. We don't know. These might not be at all relevant for children, but we won't know until we
investigation.
Try.
Yeah. So. A lot of work ahead, but really important work. Thank you so much for stepping us through this and helping us to understand what we can do and the work that's been done in the field. Look, Katrina, before we finish up, I do have a final question for you. This is a very F words conference.
It is.
What would your advice be for clinicians to implement more of the F words into their practice?
Yeah, I think the advice here, and I've probably already covered it, is to think of the whole family and the experience that they've been having, and think about supports that you can provide to support the child who, well, for paediatricians is the person that's coming to see us, but that by supporting the family, the siblings of the family, that you're going to really be helping them to support the child. And we always work thinking about, and particularly in developmental regression, but it's always been my way to work, thinking about function and fun and participation.
Yeah.
And it really, certainly in this work, it trumps diagnostic frameworks because we're dealing with a presentation and we're not sure at that point what the diagnosis will be. So it provides a way of assisting families to, they're experts in their children, but there's some elements that they would like to understand more fully. But you can do that without any reference to diagnostic frameworks.
That's important.
More often than not.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you so much, Katrina. I really love that conversation. To all of our listeners, I hope you really enjoyed that as well. A topic we haven't really covered at all in this podcast, but really important information. So I hope you enjoyed that just as much as I did. But for now, we're going to finish off this episode. We're going to bring you a lovely summary episode soon about this entire conference. So I hope you've been downloading the episodes and going back to find things that are of great interest to you. But I'll talk to you all again really soon. Bye.